Bonjour! So today I'm actually in a very special place. I'm in what's called the Former French Concession of Shanghai. So some people call it French Concession, but it's the former because it was a very long time ago that the French were here. From after the World War I, and it's really crazy because it just kept growing, the amount of population of French that were here, and there was actually a time in 1934 where there were more French here than in Lyon. And we really see so many types of French influences, whether it's with the streets, it's with the restaurants. There's just so much that derives from France. It was a very special place because it was actually the place in Shanghai where there were the first cars that were introduced there, and then after a lot of people were fascinated by having cars there. I'm actually in one of the very famous streets, and there's like a lot of modern cafes just like this one where you can sit, have a very interesting type of coffee. This is like an osmanthus, coconut milk and dirty coffee, very common here. And in 1941 the game kind of changed in the former French concession area because the Japanese came, and so when they came things changed, but actually when you walk around here you can still feel like it's the former French concession. Like you can tell from the trees, you can tell that there's a lot of cafes more than other places in Shanghai, and just I think the trees make such a big difference because there's so much sunlight and there's so much air, and here where it's very humid and very hot in the summer, this is like my favorite place. And when I was living here before, I was actually based here. I was based in a street called Jiashan Road, my favorite road, my home road. Now I'm going to show you a map of where the former French concession is. It's actually in the Xuhui and Luan districts, which you can see in the image above. There were like Japanese influence, there was American influence, but I feel like the one that remained the most is definitely like French influence, and which is why like I say Chinese people have such an admiration and are very curious about like French culture, and that's why there are so many bakeries inspired from France with their own touch, of course. There are other places in China that also had the French concession influence, including in Tianjin, Hangzhou, and a lot of differences are the demography, like the way that the streets are built and also how there's quite spacious. For such a huge city, there are not many parks, but there are like a few small parks hidden in the former French concession. And like I said, the trees really plays a huge part in knowing where it is and how different it is from the rest. 对，对对对。
你是哪个媒体的？你是哪个媒体的？
我是自己做那个法国语言还有法国文化。哦。然后我在说那个法租界以前怎么样。对。对。
叫我。
谢谢啊，可以，拜拜。
你住进2个星期对吧？
对。
好的。
对。
有机会邀请你跟着 ，OK。
可以，拜拜。Wow, I love Shanghai. You meet strangers and then they're always curious about what you're doing, especially when you're a foreigner. They want to know what you're doing. 你们没事，自然一点。对。And yeah, people are just so polite, and I think that's why there's like a lot of misconceptions about the culture here. People themselves, the people that are here, like they're very kind, very meaningful, very helpful. Like he was explaining to me that if I ever had a problem, like he will, of course, come and help me, you know, and don't hesitate to call him and don't hesitate to tell him if something's wrong. So this is one of the reasons I love Shanghai. Why is Shanghai called the Paris of the East? This is a very interesting name. When I first came here to study and to work, people were like, yeah, you're gonna move to the Paris of the East, and I was like, what? How is this the Paris of the East? Actually related to the fact that it's one of the most like modern and technologically advanced Chinese cities, especially in that time, which was the 1930s. That's when it was very advanced, and it was kind of like there was a lot of glamour, there was like a lot of high tech, a lot of things happening. And that's why a lot of people called it the Paris of the East. Like, why did people come here? They came here because actually where Shanghai is situated is a very important location. Like it's near the Yangtze River, on the southern part of the Yangtze River, and it's in a very strategic position regarding like former fishing villages, and it's was one of the 5 cities like during the Opium War. So with the opening of the port city, Shanghai was thrust into the international spotlight of trade, and that's when they decided decided to open the different sorts of foreign concessions. It was really considered like as a crossroad of so many different types of influences, like from the East and the West. It was remembered for its super vibrant nightlife. Like everything was, there were elite cabarets, nightclubs, and elite ballrooms, which is very interesting and hard to believe now, because I feel like now the nightlife is quite quiet, except in certain areas where there are clubs, but in general it's much more quiet. And so there were dances, cabarets, dinners, and it really felt like it was a really different place compared to the rest of China. So just like the actual Paris was experiencing a renaissance of its own in 1920s and 1930s, Shanghai was as well. I think it's interesting in general to see like how it came to be what it is today, and how it is today compared to all the other cities here, and why honestly it's like the place I think I would live in the most in China. And it's very different from Hong Kong and Singapore as well, because I feel like there are less these like French influences. Now, you know, after COVID, there are a lot less foreigners and everything, but I still feel the vibe of the former French concession, and with having the trees and having the parks and having the cafes and all these interesting like coffee fusions and pastry fusions, which I think is super interesting to learn about and to admire. So if you want to know more about French culture in Asia, because you know I'm half Asian and want to know more about Paris and its influences around the world, or the French language, follow this account. Make sure to subscribe to this account. Merci beaucoup, à bientôt et à demain.